The day we moved in, my mother-in-law showed up with her own key and said, "Now we're a real family." I muttered under my breath, the words burning like acid as I stood in the chaos of our new Seattle home. Boxes loomed around me, each one scrawled with my husband Soren's meticulous handwriting. That key in Vespera's hand wasn't just metal, it was a declaration of war, a claim on my life I hadn't seen coming. I'm Leora, 32, and Soren, 34, had poured everything into this Capitol Hill craftsman, our first real home after years of scraping by in rentals. This was supposed to be our sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe. But Vespera's arrival, uninvited and smug, obliterated that dream before I could even unpack a single dish. She stormed in at noon, her stilettos stabbing the hardwood like she owned it. Vespera, 58, was all sharp angles and sharper smiles, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. "Soren didn't mention?" she purred, dangling the key like a trophy as she shoved a casserole into my hands. "He gave me this last week. Said you'd love having me around." My pulse roared. Soren was downtown, buried in his tech job. Unreachable. I gripped the casserole so hard my knuckles whitened, forcing a smile that felt like a lie. This wasn't just about a key. It was Vespera's audacity. Her assumption she could invade our life without a word. I'd known she was controlling. Soren had sworn he'd set limits. But this was betrayal, raw and deliberate. She didn't just walk in, she claimed the space, rearranging my kitchen, critiquing my chaotic taste, and dictating dinner plans like I was her guest. Every sentence was a slap, stripping away my control. I wanted to hurl the key out the window, to scream until the walls shook, but years of swallowing her jabs glued my lips shut. I unpacked books, my hands trembling, each movement a surrender to her presence. She hummed as she organized my shelves. Oblivious to the storm in my chest, that key, now glinting on the counter, Stanitzer, mocked me. I imagined smashing it under a hammer. But instead, I turned away, my breath ragged, When Soren got home, Vespera was still there, cooing over him like he was her child king. "I've been helping Leora settle," she said, kissing his cheek. I waited for him to see my fury, to feel the air crackling, but he just grinned and hugged me. "Vespera's a lifesaver, huh?" My heart plummeted. Later, in the bathroom, I locked the door and faced the mirror, my eyes blazing. This was my home. I'd fight for it, even if it meant tearing everything apart. I woke the next morning with a knot in my chest. The memory of Vespera's key like a splinter I couldn't dig out. The Seattle dawn filtered through our bedroom curtains, casting gray shadows on the walls. Soren was already gone, his side of the bed cold, off to another early meeting. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying yesterday's invasion. My silence had let Vespera walk all over me, and Soren's cluelessness made it worse. I wasn't just angry, I was drowning in the weight of my own restraint. Downstairs, the house felt different, like it wasn't fully mine anymore. I avoided the kitchen, where Vespera's casserole dish sat on the counter like a taunt. Instead, I brewed coffee in the dining room, the only space she hadn't touched. As the machine hissed, I tried to focus on work. Freelance graphic design deadlines were piling up, but my mind kept circling back to that key. Why hadn't Soren told me? Was he hiding something? Or was he just too spineless to stand up to her? Mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Vespera, dropping by to help with the guest room. Be there at 11. No question, no permission, just her assuming control again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to type something sharp, but I deleted every draft. Confronting her felt like stepping into a minefield, and I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I threw myself into unpacking the dining room, hauling boxes with a fury that left my arms aching. Each one I opened was a small act of reclaiming my space. When Vespera arrived, she didn't knock. The front door creaked, and there she was, striding in with a bag of curtains she'd picked out for us. "This place needs a woman's touch," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. I froze, a lamp in my hands, my pulse hammering. She didn't even glance at me before heading upstairs, her heels echoing like a countdown. I followed, my jaw clenched. Watching her fling open the guest room door and start measuring windows. "Soren will love these," she said, holding up gaudy floral fabric. "He always trusts my taste." That's when it hit me. A twist in the gut that wasn't just anger. Soren hadn't just given her a key. He'd been texting her about our home, our plans, maybe even our fights. How much had he shared? I remembered late-night calls he'd taken in the other room, his vague excuses about work. My stomach churned. Was Vespera's grip on him deeper than I'd realized? I wanted to demand answers, but she was already talking, planning family Sundays at our house like it was her domain. I swallowed the urge to snap, forcing myself to nod as she prattled on. But inside, something was shifting. I wasn't the same Leora who'd let her waltz in yesterday. Each of her words stoked a fire, and I could feel it building, steady and fierce. I excused myself to the backyard, pretending to check the garden, and stood by the overgrown rose bushes, my hands balled into fists. I needed to talk to Soren, to lay it all bare, but I knew he'd dodge or defend her. I had to be smarter, stronger. As I turned to go back inside, the doorbell rang, a sharp, unexpected sound. Through the window, I saw a delivery truck pulling away and a package on the porch. It was addressed to Vespera, care of our address. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just visiting. She was planting roots. The package on the porch was a match to dry tinder. I stood there, staring at Vespera's name scrawled on the label, my breath shallow. This wasn't just her overstepping. It was a calculated move. A signal she meant to entrench herself in our lives. The Seattle air felt thick, the overcast sky pressing down as I carried the box inside, my hands unsteady. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Instead, I hid it in the hall closet, slamming the door like I could shut out the truth. I needed answers, and Soren was the only one who could give them. I texted him, "We need to talk, tonight." No response. He was probably in a meeting, but the silence gnawed at me. I paced the living room, the hardwood creaking under my steps, my mind racing. Vespera's family Sundays, her key, the package. It all pointed to something bigger. I thought back to those late-night calls, Soren's evasive answers. The twist I'd sensed yesterday hardened into certainty. Vespera wasn't just controlling. She was orchestrating. By afternoon, I couldn't sit still. I drove to a coffee shop in Fremont, needing air, needing space to think. The place was crowded, all exposed brick and the hum of conversation. But I found a corner table and opened my laptop. I wasn't designing, I was digging. I checked Soren's social media, something I hadn't done in years. There, buried in his messages, were chats with Vespera. Not just logistics about the move, but photos of our house, our plans, even my sketches for the nursery we hadn't told anyone about. My throat tightened. He'd been feeding her everything. I was shaking when Vespera texted again. "Dinner at your place tonight? I'll cook." The nerve of it snapped something inside me. No more nodding. No more swallowing my rage. I typed back, "Not tonight. We're busy." Short, sharp, final. My heart pounded as I hit send. It was small, but it was a line in the sand. When I got home, Soren was there, loosening his tie in the kitchen. "What's with the text?" he asked, his brow furrowed. I didn't ease into it. "Why does Vespera have a key? Soren, why's she getting mail here? And why are you telling her everything about our life?" My voice cracked. But I didn't stop. His face went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "It's not like that," he stammered. "She's just involved." "Involved?" I laughed, bitter and loud. "She's running our lives, and you're letting her." I pulled the package from the closet and dropped it on the counter. "Explain this." He stared at it, then at me. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Leora, I didn't know about the package," he said, but his voice wavered. I didn't believe him. The argument spiraled, voices rising until the neighbors could probably hear. I didn't care. I was done hiding, done pretending. "She's not family if she's controlling us," I said, my words slicing the air. "You choose, Soren, her, or me." He didn't answer, just looked away. And that silence was louder than any shout. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. It was Vespera, holding a bottle of wine, her smile faltering as she saw my face. "Bad time?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting. The audacity pushed me over the edge. "Yes," I said, my voice steel, "and you're not welcome here tonight." Her eyes widened, but I didn't back down. Soren said nothing, frozen, in front of her, in front of him. I felt the room shift. This was my stand, and it was only the beginning. Vespera's face froze, the wine bottle trembling in her grip. For a moment, no one moved. The air in the kitchen was electric, charged with the weight of my words. I stood tall, my heart thundering, every nerve alive with the certainty that I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Soren's eyes darted between us, but he stayed silent. A bystander in his own home, Vespera's lips parted, then closed, her composure cracking like thin ice. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice low, each syllable a challenge. I didn't flinch. "You heard me," I said, stepping closer. "This is my house. You don't get to walk in whenever you want." Her eyes narrowed, but I held her gaze, my resolve ironclad. She turned to Soren, expecting rescue, but he looked away, his hands shoved in his pockets. The silence was deafening. Vespera set the bottle on the counter with a deliberate clink. "I see," she said, her tone icy. "I'll leave you to sort this out." She walked out, her heels clicking a slow retreat, the door slamming behind her. I exhaled, my legs shaky. But the victory felt hollow. Soren's silence was a wound that hadn't stopped bleeding. I turned to him, my voice steady despite the ache. "This ends now, Soren. No more keys, no more secrets. If you can't stand up to her, we're done." His face crumpled, and for the first time, he looked small. "I didn't mean for this," he said, his words halting. "She's my mom, Leora. She's always been like this." I shook my head. "That's not an excuse. You chose to let her in. You chose to hide it." The next morning, I changed the locks. The locksmith worked quickly, the new keys cold and solid in my hand. Soren watched from the dining room, saying nothing. When I handed him a key, I made it clear, "This is ours. No one else gets one." He nodded, but the distance between us lingered, a crack that wouldn't mend overnight. Vespera didn't call or text, but her absence was loud. A week later, I found the package she'd received in the closet and opened it. Inside were legal documents, papers for a trust fund in Soren's name, with Vespera as the trustee, giving her control over his finances even after our marriage. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just meddling, it was a power play. One Soren hadn't known about. I showed him Chasen, and his shock was genuine, his hands shaking as he read. "She never told me," he whispered. We confronted Vespera together at a neutral spot, a quiet park in Madison Valley. The spring air sharp with the scent of cedar. She sat on a bench, her posture rigid, her face a mask of wounded pride. "I was protecting Soren," she said, her voice clipped. "You're too young to understand family loyalty." I didn't bite. Family doesn't control. Vespera, it respects. Soren, finally, spoke up. "You went too far. Mom, this stops." Her eyes flashed, but she said nothing. Her silence an admission. The fallout spread. Soren cut contact with her, at least for now, and we started therapy, peeling back years of unspoken tensions. The house felt like ours again. Each room a reclaimed territory. I hung my own curtains, painted the walls colors Vespera would have hated. The nursery sketches went back on my desk, a promise to myself that our future would be ours alone. One evening, as the Seattle skyline glowed beyond our windows, I stood in the backyard, the rose bushes now trimmed and blooming. Soren joined me, tentative, but there. We didn't speak, but the quiet was softer, less jagged. I looked at the stars, my breath steady, and said, "This is our home, and I'll fight for it. Always."